here at SEC Media Days with the executive producer of Any Given Saturday, coming to Netflix August 5th. I'm fired up for this. I mean, chronicling several teams in the conference. It's like, I think, a great visual into what college football is in the Southeastern Conference. Paul, one, fired up to have you here. Two, what was the most surprising thing about doing this project?
I think for me, I mean, you can tell from my accent, this is not my natural kind of habitat. It was my first kind of exposure to college sport. I think the biggest personal takeaway from me was how much I love marching bands now. Like you go and you're like, oh my God, is that Star Wars they're playing? That's like, yeah, you're like marching up and down. So that was great. But just the spectacle of it, just go to these stadiums of like 80, 90, 100,000 people and the noise and the passion for it and the generational passion. I remember, you go to an LSU game and it's like grandfather down to, infant kid decked out in kind of LSU colors. And so I think it was that really surprised me. And I had an idea of, how passionate people were about college sport, but until you see it, until you feel it and hear it, I don't think you have any idea.
Because you're also an Emmy Award-winning producer from your work on Drive to Survive, which I know a lot of folks over that, if you have a Netflix, if you have a pulse, you know what that is essentially. If you know Drive to Survive. When it came to following what last season was, what games, and I don't want to give anything away, but what were the games that you hit that you were like, oh, this is different. I'm glad we're here.
Well, what we try to do on these shows is always try and just step slightly back from the results, because you have to think, listen, this thing's going to air 6 months after the season's finished. And at that point, everybody's going to know who won the SEC championship, who won the college playoff, who didn't. So we're always trying to find another way into the storytelling and make it character-led, really try and articulate the emotional stakes for coaches or for players, whoever it is. But obviously, listen, the football plays a huge role in it, and we're incredibly lucky. We were with Vandy when they beat Alabama, which I'd love to say we saw that coming, but happened to be in the right place at the right time, and that was extraordinary. To see how fired up they were, and they very much used Nick Saban's words of no easy games in the SEC apart from kind of Vandy, but they went out there and, they played their asses off, and it was great. And then the aftermath of that game, carrying the goalpost down kind of Main Street was extraordinary. So, there was that. And then, we Texas A&M, their final game against Texas, where it was kind of, at that point it was win or go home for them. That was amazing. And, College Place, an amazing venue for football. So we're incredibly lucky. And I think what's great about the SEC, though, is once that season starts, just every game feels important. Every game feels like it's life and death for all the different teams. So in that way, we were kind of blessed as producers to be able to make this show.
What got you excited to make this project? Because people look at your previous work and it's not like, oh, this guy, has been around the college football space. Like, it seems like there was something that obviously drew you to doing this project in the SEC. What was that?
I'm a sports nut, a total sports nut, and I love all sports. And I think for me, this was I was an NFL fan, like from the 80s when NFL first came to the UK, and, you tended to be a Chicago Bears fan because the 86 Bears, or a Miami Dolphins fan because of Dan Marino. Sure. I was a Miami Dolphins fan, and I loved NFL, and I've always watched NFL, but I'd never really been exposed to college football before. And I sort of could never quite wrap my head around why people were so, excited about it, and the loyalties that they had to these kind of universities. So from a personal point of view, I just wanted to understand it. I wanted to understand why there was huge parts of this country that college football is first, and NFL is second, or not even of interest for them. And so, and then you get there and you sample the atmosphere, and it's just completely unique. There is nothing like it in sport. And people had said to me, okay, the games, they're like English soccer games.
Yeah.
And I can see why they make that parallel, but it's a completely different atmosphere. It's like, it's non-stop noise. It's, it tends to be, in the UK in soccer, you have home and away fans. So it tends to be built around the sort of the back and forth between home and like, your shit, no, your shit, like blah, 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 that kind of back and forth. Whereas in college, it's like, it's all one color.
Yeah.
And it's just like, like I say, marching bands, and it's, the emotion and all that kind of stuff. So I just think it's an utterly unique, occasion in sport, and would encourage anybody to go and sample it firsthand. And if our show can kind of introduce it to an audience, maybe in the UK, maybe in Europe, maybe internationally, it's a great thing about Netflix. It's a global platform, and so I think if people are exposed to this world, you're going to become a fan for life, because it's intoxicating.
How much did you get exposed to some of those like unique traditions, to the different schools that you went to? Because there's some weird ones now. Like there's a couple that you're like, wait, there.
What's the toilet roll in the tree?
Toomer's Corner.
Toomer's Corner. Yeah, that one was like that was kind of crazy.
These Americans, man.
Yeah. And then what's it? The Vol Navy? Is it the Vol Navy?
Yeah, they're different.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was all that stuff. And again, until you're in it, you're like, what? You got your own Navy? And they go down the back of the stage.
You guys going to war? What's going on here?
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And it's, like I say, utterly unique in sport, completely unique. And those traditions, it's, everyone always, I think everyone still thinks of America as a new country, okay, don't have much history, don't have many traditions. And you're like, some of these schools have been around for, 100 years and playing football, and a lot of those traditions are ingrained in the culture. And it's amazing, and I was excited because I'd never spent a lot of time in the southeast of the country, and and it was so, everywhere I went, the people were just, so respectful, so polite, so welcoming. The food was amazing.
I was going to say,
it was a great project to be part of.
Where's the best place you ate on the project?
So we went to this amazing like shrimp and oyster place in Baton Rouge. And I mean, literally oysters like that.
Just a game.
Was it Pete's Oyster Bar or something?
I couldn't tell you, but when you say Baton Rouge, when you say Louisiana, just by reputation alone, I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Last question for you here. Appreciate all your time. Excited for us to get to watch this project that y'all have spent a lot of time and effort making this a great, I think, representation of what the SEC is and what college football is. Who are you excited for the audience to get to know at a deeper level? Because you chronicle a lot for people throughout this. Who are you like, man, they kind of know who this person is, but when they watch our documentary, this is going to be a game changer?
Well, I think, we mentioned Diego Pavia. I mean, I think people realize he's a character, and they realize he's larger than life. And I think you definitely see that. I'm going to say, like, if you come to the screening tonight, I think you see a slightly different side of Coach Kelly, which I think, and Coach Kelly's he's tough talking, desk slamming, that kind of guy. And he is that guy, but you definitely see a different side of him. And I think you have an understanding of why he's so driven and why he operates in the way that he does. And I have to say, Coach Kelly was fantastic for us. Really, an early advocate of the show. Really great to have a school like LSU on board in the way that he did. But I think people will come away from it and see a slightly different side of Brian Kelly.
That's really interesting, because I think SEC fans in general, when he got hired away from Notre Dame, he's not from the SEC, doesn't have SEC experience. And so they're like, how is this guy going to fit in this conference? And so to hear you say that he has some depth in this documentary, I'm excited to watch. I know everyone else is as well. But Paul, we appreciate your time. We're fired up to watch this. Appreciate you doing this. And thanks for making this happen for college football.
No problem. Thank you.